Hello everyone, welcome to my kitchen. My name is Michael and today I'm going to share with you my recipe on how I make a tomato galette. This is going to bring the taste of summer right into your kitchen with these fresh tomatoes that you probably have in your backyard in your garden now, and if not, you can get them locally at your farmer's market this time of year. Stick with me and I'll show you how to make it. Let's get started making our tomato galette. So we're going to start with the crust because that's going to take the longest. After we get it put together, it needs to go back in the refrigerator where it can cool for an hour. So that's going to take the longest part of this whole process. So we're going to get started with that and I'll show you what ingredients we're going to be using. So I've got 1.5 cups of all-purpose flour, a half a teaspoon of salt, and I've got some really cold unsalted butter that I've cubed up here. I've got 10 tablespoons and I just cut that up and kept it in the refrigerator. You want to make sure that it's really cold when you put your crust together for the galette, that it's, when you incorporate it in it, that it's really cold. So we're going to be using our food processor today, and I've got just the regular blade that's in that, as you can see here. And if you don't have a food processor, they actually make another device. It's a handheld device that you can incorporate fats and things into flour, and this has 5 blades on it, so this will work just as well. So if you don't have that, you can definitely use this. And then I've got some cold water that I've got some ice in it. We want to make sure we try to keep this as cold as we can, and we don't want to over mix the dough because then it will get really tough, and we don't want that for our pie crust. So we've got some cold water here, and I'll be adding tablespoons of that water, and we'll just give it a pulse just to get it mixed together. So I'm going to go ahead and put my flour and my salt together and give that a little pulse in so we can kind of get that mixed together. And we'll add our salt. And I'm just going to give that a little pulse together to get those two incorporated. All right, so we've got the salt and the flour together now. And so let's put our butter in. And we're just going to take that and just put them in kind of randomly throughout. And we want this, once we get it blended together, we want it to look like a little pea size, the flour. You'll be able to tell when you're looking at it that it's the right consistency. So I got my butter put in, and let's just give this a little blend through, and I'm going to watch it to see what it's going to do. That looks good. That you can see you still see the small pieces of the butter that's in there, and that's what you want. You don't want it completely mixed together, but just enough that it's like little small pea size into the flour. Okay, so now we're going to put in the water. And I'm going to take this little piece out of the top of the food processor, so here, and I'm going to add 1 tablespoon of this really cold water in through the top here at a time, and then I'm going to pulse it. I'm probably going to pulse it between 8 and 10 times. I don't want to go any more than that, and we'll see if it holds together with the 6. We'll start with 6 tablespoons, and we'll see where we go with that. So I'm going to go ahead and put that here in the processor. All right, I've given that 10 pulses. Let's see where we're at with that. I'm actually going to unplug this because I'm going to stick my hand in it just to be on the safe side of it. And let's see if this holds together. What you want it to do is you want it to be able to hold together. So that looks like that's got enough water in it, and you want it to be able to hold together. So now I'm going to dump this out on this surface, and we will put this into a ball and put it back in the refrigerator. All right, so we're not going to overwork this flour butter mixture. We just want this to come together in just a little shape that we can form it in, so I can put it in some cellophane and put it back in the refrigerator. All right, I have my bench scraper now. I'm going to get that up here and get a lot of this incorporated into that. All right, that's where we want that with that. Let me get some cling film. These bench scrapers are incredible if you don't have one. So we're going to wrap this up pretty tightly. And we're going to put this back in the refrigerator so that the butter that we had out can get back to a solid state again. And then we'll take this out and we'll roll it out for our pie crust. So this will be in the refrigerator for 1 hour, and I'll be back and we'll get ready for the tomatoes. All right, we've got our crust back in the refrigerator now, and it is cooling down. And now we're going to work on our tomatoes. Where I'm at right now, the tomatoes are in season, and you can get these at the local farmer's market, or you might have some growing in your backyard. and you've got them laying on the counter trying to figure out what you want to do with them, this might be what you might want to try. So I'm going to go through right now, and I've given these a wash, and we're going to go in and we're going to prepare these. I've got about 5 of these, and what we want to have consistent slices. So whatever thickness you want them, I'm going to probably start out mine at about maybe 1/4 inch, a little bit less than 1/4 inch, and I'm going to use a knife. And I've also got a mandolin here that would give me consistent slices too. So I'm probably going to wind up using this, but I'm going to show you what I'm going to do with this knife. So what we want to do, we've got our tomatoes all washed, and we want to go in and we want to core that out so we get the core out of it, and then we'll just start slicing them. So whatever you decide to do, whatever size, you want to just be consistent across all the tomatoes, that's the size you're going to use. And if they get out of shape, you know, there's no big worry about them. There's not anything that's not. So when we line our pie crust with this, you'll see what this is. So I'm going to give this one a slice here. I don't think I'm going to get another one out of it. But anyway, I've cut mine. They're consistently about the same size on that. So that's what you want. So I'm going to continue to cut these up. And then I've got a tray here. And you can do one of two things. You can either put it in a colander and put another bowl under it. And you can put the tomatoes in the colander. Because what we want to do is we want to try to take out as much of the juice of these as we can. Because if you don't want that in your pie crust, because that will make for a soggy pie crust. So what we're going to do, I'm going to do today is I've got a tray here. And I've got some paper towels lined in it. And I'm going to line the tray with the tomatoes, and we're just going to give those, you know, spread those out here evenly in our tray. And then I've got some salt. I got a little bit, about a teaspoon of salt. And we're going to go through and we're going to drizzle a little bit of salt over all of these. And what the salt's going to do is it's going to pull a lot of the moisture out of the tomatoes too. So this process will take anywhere from 15 to 30 minutes. So while our pie crust is cooling down and our tomatoes, we're removing a lot of the moisture out of those, they should come together. So when the pie crust does, we roll it out, we put our tomatoes in it, everything will come together at one time. So I'm going to go ahead and finish cutting up these tomatoes. I'm going to go ahead and sprinkle a little bit of this salt on the top of the tomatoes here. And you just want to put a liberal amount on there. And we're going to do that with all of them. So that's what we're going to do. All right, so I will see you back in about when the pie crust and the tomatoes are done. We'll continue to work on these, and we'll get ready to assemble the pie. All right, we'll see you in a few minutes. Okay, now it's been an hour, and I've taken my dough out of the refrigerator, and I'm going to take it off of the cling film here. And I'm going to put a little bit of flour on my surface here, and we want to roll this out to roughly about 12 inches. So put a little bit on the top. All right, my rolling pin here is roughly about 12 inches, so I'm going to use that as a guide. But you don't have to get real precise with this. And we'll just roll this dough out. All right, so I went on and rolled my dough out. I've got it here, and you can see here it's roughly about 12 inches from that. I'm going to take my bench scraper and just make sure that it's lifted off the piece. And then I'm going to take it and I'm going to put it on my rolling pin, and I'm going to lift it up. And I'm going to transfer that over to some parchment paper. All right, now we've got this transferred over to some parchment paper, and let's get ready to prepare our tomato mixture so that we can get this into the oven. All right, stay with me and I'll get my tomatoes and we'll get moving on to the next part. All right, so we've got our crust made for our galette, and we're going to start working on our tomatoes now. I don't know if you can really tell from looking at these, but these paper towels are really wet from the tomato juice that salt has pulled out of those. So I'm going to take a dry paper towel, and I'm just going to go through and wipe off a little bit more of the moisture on the top, and then we're going to put these in a bowl and put our other ingredients together, and we'll start making our galette. So I've got a bowl here, and I've got 2 trays of tomatoes, and I'm going to pick out probably half of them. I've got enough here to make 2 of these, so I'm going to go ahead and make 1. All right, so I've got my tomatoes pulled out now, and I'm going to go ahead and add my other ingredients to it. So I've got 2 tablespoons of extra virgin olive oil, and we'll add that to the top of that. And I've got 1 shallot that I've cut up really thinly. It's almost not paper thin, but pretty close to it. And I've got them just in little ribbons. So I'm going to go ahead and add my 1 shallot that I've got in there now. And I've got 1 garlic clove minced. We'll go ahead and add that in there. And I've got just a pinch of thyme here, so I'm going to go ahead and put that thyme in there. And a little bit of black pepper. Just a little pinch of that. I'm not going to put any more salt in it because it's probably got enough in it from where the seasoning was that went on and when I was extracting a lot of the juice out of them. So I'm not going to put any more salt on it. And you can definitely taste them at this point to see if it needs any or not. But I think these are going to have enough in them. I think I will give 1 a try just to make sure. We're not going to need any more salt on these. So definitely try them before you put any more salt in them and see what you might need on those. All right, so now let's start getting our galette ready to be put together. And I'm going to get one of these trays here because I'm going to be using that to put my crust on. So I'll be right back with that. All right, so I got my tray cleaned off now, and I'm going to go ahead and put my parchment paper that has my crust on it. And it doesn't really matter if it fits in there nicely because what we're going to do, we're going to roll it up about 1.5 inches from the edges. All right, so I like a lot of cheese on mine. This is a Gruyere. This is about 1 cup of cheese that I'm going to put on the bottom. And what this is going to do is it's going to create a barrier between the actual crust itself and the tomatoes, just in case there's a little bit more juice comes out of those. So I'm going to put about 1 cup on those. And like I said, we're going to be rolling it up about 1.5 inches from the edges. So you don't have to go all the way to the edges with that cheese. And we're just going to kind of spread that out to where we get pretty close to that 1.5 inches to the edge of those. If you can't find the Gruyere cheese, you can use another low moisture cheese like a mozzarella. You want something that's going to be low moisture. You don't want to have to put any more moisture into the crust itself that you need to. And with this type of cheese, it'll actually absorb a little bit of that more juice from those tomatoes. So we've got our cheese spread out here now. And let's take our tomatoes and we're going to put this around. And if any of those got a little rough as you were mixing them up, definitely you can put those on the bottom. And we just want to kind of overlap them a little bit here on the bottom. So the size of the tomatoes that I had today, that was probably about 3 that we had. So depending on what size you have, if you've got the heirlooms, they're a little bit bigger. You might want to have, maybe 2 or 3 of those. But just depending on how big the tomatoes are, how many you'll need. Like I said, I've got enough left over there now that I can make another one of these. All right, so we've got, I didn't pour that last little bit of moisture back in there because I didn't want to add any more to it. So I've got this ready to go. And who doesn't like cheese? But I'm going to put a little bit more on the top. I have grated some Parmesan, and this is about 1/4 cup. And we're going to spread this over the top of our tomatoes here. All right, that is our ingredients. So now we're going to take the crust, and like I said, this is very forgiving. We just fold it in, and every inch or so, you just want to kind of fold it in on itself until we can get it all pulled up on itself. All right, I've got my galette made now, and I've got the edges pulled up on the top of it. And I've got my oven preheated now at 375. And I've got 1 egg here that I have beat up a little bit. And I've got a brush, and I'm going to put just a little bit on the outside of the crust here, just to give it a little bit extra so that when it browns up a little bit, it'll have a nice little crust on it when it's cooking. All right, there we go. We're going to pop this into the oven and it'll be between 35 to 45 minutes. We'll take a look at it and see on 375 and we'll be back and I'll show you what it looks like when it's done. All right, be back in a few minutes. All right, I have pulled my tomato galette out of the oven and you can see here it has got a nice brown color to it and the tomatoes look really good and the cheese is all melted on the top, and we're going to let this cool. Now we need to let this sit in this tray for 10 minutes and then I'll remove it from the tray. And then I'm going to put it on one of these wire racks so that it can cool the rest of the way, and that needs to sit for another 20 minutes. So we're looking at another 30 minutes of cooling before we can eat it. So I'm going to let these cool, and then I went out and picked some basil, and I've got some basil leaves here, and I'm going to cut some of those up, and we're going to put that on the top just as we're getting ready to serve it. So this is what we have right now. It did take 45 minutes in my oven at 375, and I can't wait to taste it. I wish you could really smell it. The herbs and things in it are really fragrant. So I'll see you back in 30 minutes and we'll give this a taste test. All right, I am back. It has been 30 minutes and the tomato galette has cooled down, and I've got it on my parchment paper here resting on this wood block, and we're going to cut it now and give this a taste test. So I went on to cut my basil up on it. And you don't have to be, meticulous with it. Just, just roughly cut the basil up on it to put on it to give a little bit of grain and some flavor to it. So I'm going to cut this down the middle and we're going to give it a taste test and see what it tastes like. All righty, let's give this tomato galette a taste and see what it looks like. This looks really good. That is delicious. You're going to have to try this one. This is another home run for you. So if you've got those tomatoes laying around, you got some in your backyard that are coming in at this time of the year, into season, let's bring that taste of summer into the kitchen and put it together with this puff pastry that I put together today and make yourself a tomato galette. All righty. If you like this video, maybe you might want to try one of these other two over here. Check out something you might like, something else in the channel. And I sure do appreciate everybody that's subscribed to me. So share, like, and subscribe, and I'll see you in my next video. Bye-bye now. Delicious.